don't know why I'm telling this story now. Maybe because time has a way of making old wounds fester instead of heal. Maybe because last night, for the first time in 20 years, I dreamed about the station again. And this time, I swear I heard my brother calling my name. It's hard to explain to people who didn't live through it what the early 2000s were like, especially out here in Wyoming. Before smartphones, before GPS everywhere, you could drive for hours without seeing another living soul. It wasn't strange. It was just life. And if you were stubborn or stupid enough to wander off the main roads without telling anyone where you were going, well, sometimes you didn't come back. My brother, Chris, and I, we weren't adventurers. Not really. We weren't the kind of guys who had survival gear packed to the roof and plans for every worst-case scenario. We were just a couple of small-town nobodies with a battered pickup truck, 2 handheld radios, and a bad habit of chasing storms like we had something to prove. It was supposed to be a simple weekend trip. A freak thunderstorm had been sitting stubbornly over the hills north of Greystone for days, late October, way past the usual season. The kind of storm that shouldn't have existed. Chris was obsessed with it, said the pressure systems didn't make sense, said the radio traffic was getting weird, said he picked up signals that didn't match any known frequencies. I didn't care about all that. I just missed him. We hadn't talked much since he moved out west, chasing odd jobs and stranger hobbies, so when he called out of the blue and asked if I wanted to drive up into nowhere with him to chase a ghost storm, I said yes. God help me, I said yes. The last clear memory I have of Chris is him leaning over the hood of the truck, fiddling with his radio, smiling like he had the whole world in his pocket. We were about 10 miles outside of Greystone by then. The storm sat heavy on the horizon, an ugly wall of purple-black clouds, but the air was dry and cold, and the road stretched out behind us, empty and endless. We hadn't seen another car for hours. He kept tuning the radio, tapping the side of it, listening. His face changed, like he caught something, just for a second, and it scared him. "What is it?" I remember asking. He just shook his head and smiled thinly. "Nothing. Probably just interference." That was the last real conversation we had. The next morning, I woke up in the driver's seat, stiff and sore, with frost covering the inside of the windshield. Chris's side of the truck was empty. His jacket was still there. His boots were gone. The radio sat on the dashboard, blinking with a dead battery. I found his tracks leading away from the truck, weaving through the brittle grass toward a low rise in the distance, toward something I couldn't see yet. I followed them for maybe half a mile before they just stopped. No drag marks, no other footprints. Just a clean end, like he'd been plucked off the face of the earth. We spent 2 weeks searching after that. The county sheriff, a handful of volunteers, a couple of old-timers from Greystone, planes, dogs, helicopters, nothing. Not so much as a scrap of cloth. Chris was officially listed as missing. Unofficially, well, you know how small towns are. People talk, people whisper. Maybe he got drunk, wandered into the woods, and froze to death. Maybe he got spooked by something and ran off. Maybe he never wanted to be found. But I knew better. I knew my brother. And I knew he wouldn't just disappear, especially not after what I found later. About a month after the search was called off, I went through his things, the few boxes he'd left at Mom's house when he moved away, old clothes, a half-busted laptop, and tucked at the bottom, wrapped in a plastic grocery bag, was his backup radio. It was dead, the screen cracked, but when I replaced the batteries, it came to life, and there was a recording. The timestamp was the night he vanished, maybe 10 hours after I last saw him. The file was short, less than 30 seconds. It starts with static, sharp and broken like a bad signal in a tunnel. Then comes Chris's voice, panting like he'd been running. "Station. Not alone. Something wrong. Don't come in." Then more static, and under it, something else. A voice, but not his. I played that recording 100 times, 1,000 times. I drove myself half mad listening to it. I took it to the sheriff, to a local ham radio club, to a guy at the university who specialized in audio analysis. No one could clean it up. No one could tell me what the second voice was saying, but they all agreed on one thing. It wasn't Chris, and it wasn't human. After that, I tried to move on, moved away, changed jobs, Pretended it was just a bad chapter in a life that needed forgetting. It worked mostly, until last week. I don't know what triggered it. Maybe it was the way the wind hit the side of the house that night. Maybe it was the first cold snap of the year settling deep into my bones. Maybe it was just time. I dreamed about Chris. I dreamed about the station. And I woke up with the taste of iron in my mouth and a voice ringing in my ears that wasn't mine. Come back, come back. It took me 3 days to convince myself I wasn't crazy. Another 2 to track down Greystone again. Small towns fade fast, especially ones that were dying to begin with. There were hardly any mentions online. An old postal code, a blurry map, some half-dead message boards. But I found it. And now I'm driving. Back across those dead stretches of highway. Back into the teeth of another cold October storm. Back to where I lost my brother. The truck rattles over broken asphalt. The landscape stretching out around me, grey and endless, like a sea frozen in mid-wave. Every few miles I pass the skeleton of some old barn, some crumbling fence, some shell of a place that meant something once. They all look the same now, weathered, empty, forgotten, just like Greystone. As I crest a low hill, the town comes into view. If you can call it that. A scatter of leaning houses. A boarded-up general store. A gas station with rusted pumps that probably haven't worked since Clinton was president. And looming over it all, farther out past the edge of the town, half hidden by the rise of the hills, is a thin, crooked spire of metal. The weather station. It looks smaller than I remember. Or maybe I just grew up and realized how small everything really is once you get far enough away. I pull into what passes for the main street and kill the engine. For a moment, the silence is so deep, it feels like stepping into a grave. No cars, no people. Just the whisper of dry grass and the soft crackle of the cooling engine. I sit there, hands on the wheel, trying to convince myself this isn't a mistake. I don't believe in ghosts. I don't believe in monsters. I believe in things that get lost. Things that break. Things that disappear because sometimes the world is just cruel and senseless and bigger than we are. But still, I feel something watching, something waiting. I take a breath, open the door and step out into the chill. The last time I was here, I lost my brother. This time, I don't know what I'll lose, but I have to know. I have to know what happened, even if it kills me, even if it's something worse. The first thing I noticed about Greystone was how empty it felt. Not abandoned, empty. Like a town where all the people had simply decided one day to leave and never looked back. But there were signs of life, if you looked close enough. A porch swing creaking on rusted chains. A battered pickup truck parked under a collapsing carport. Faint wisps of smoke curling out of a chimney 2 streets over, dissolving into the low, leaden sky. People still lived here, just not the kind of people who welcome strangers. I made my way down the cracked sidewalk toward what used to be the general store. The windows were boarded over from the inside, and the peeling letters above the door spelled out Harlan's Supply, though half the sign was missing. I hesitated before pushing the door open. A tarnished brass bell overhead gave a weak, rattling jingle. The inside smelled of dry rot and old coffee. Behind the counter sat a woman in her 60s, her grey hair pulled back into a tight braid, a cigarette burning low between her fingers. She didn't look up. For a moment, I just stood there trying to find the right words. How do you ask someone about a place everyone wants to forget? I cleared my throat. Excuse me, I'm looking for the old weather station, out past the hills. Her eyes flicked up at me then, sharp, cold, and for just a second, I saw something flicker across her face. Recognition. Fear. You don't want to go out there, she said, voice rasped with smoke. Nothing out there but rust and bad ground. I shifted uncomfortably. I have to. Family reasons. Her gaze narrowed, but she didn't press. She just stubbed out her cigarette in a cracked ashtray and jerked her chin toward the back of the store. Map's on the wall by the cooler. Take it if you want. Don't expect it to help you much. I murmured a thank you and moved toward the back. The map was a relic, probably older than I was. Faded lines crisscrossed a rough sketch of the area, roads that barely existed anymore, creeks long dried up. I found the station marked by a tiny black X near the edge of the hills. No road leading to it, no name, just the mark. As I traced the path with my finger,
I felt the hairs on my arms stand up, a prickle of something I couldn't name. When I turned back, the woman was watching me, her arms folded tight across her chest, as if bracing against a cold wind only she could feel.
"You're not the first one to go looking," she said quietly, "but you might be the last." I left without buying anything. Outside, the wind had picked up, tugging at the loose corners of old shingles and stirring dust along the street. The storm was building again, the sky darkening to a deep, bruised purple. I needed to move fast. I climbed back into my truck and drove through the outskirts of town, following the rough directions I'd memorized from the map. Past the crumbling grain silo, past the sun-bleached cemetery where crooked stones leaned like broken teeth, past the last house, a sagging two-story wrapped in plastic sheeting that flapped and snapped in the rising wind. Beyond that, the world narrowed. The road faded into a pair of rutted tracks barely visible among the grass. The ground turned uneven, scarred by years of neglect and erosion. I drove until the truck started to protest, wheels slipping in the muddy ruts. Then I killed the engine and continued on foot. The hills loomed ahead, their slopes covered in brittle scrub and dead trees. Lightning flickered far off in the distance, silent for now but promising a storm to come. As I hiked, I kept my head down, focusing on the crunch of my boots against the frost-bitten ground, the rasp of my own breathing. Every now and then, I thought I caught movement out of the corner of my eye. Figures shifting between the trees, shadows skimming along the edge of my vision. But when I turned to look, there was nothing. Just the wind. Just the empty hills. It was almost dusk when I saw it. The station. It jutted out of the hillside like a broken tooth, a low, squat building of rusted steel and concrete, topped by a skeletal radio tower that leaned at an uneasy angle. The fence surrounding it had long since collapsed, twisted metal half buried under years of dirt and debris. From a distance it looked abandoned, forgotten, but as I drew closer I realized something that made my stomach knot. The front door was open, not broken open, not hanging off its hinges, just ajar, like someone was still inside. I stood there for a long time, the wind buffeting my jacket, the first fat drops of rain spattering the ground around me. I should have turned back then. I should have listened to every instinct screaming in the back of my mind. But I thought of Chris. I thought of the radio. I thought of the voice that wasn't his. And I stepped through the door. The inside was worse than I remembered. The air smelled of mildew and old metal, sharp and wet, like the inside of a gutted machine. Water dripped somewhere in the darkness, a slow, rhythmic plink that echoed off the walls. My flashlight cut a narrow path through the gloom, illuminating peeling paint, shattered monitors, and overturned desks. The main room stretched out before me, cluttered with the wreckage of whatever work had once been done here. Weather instruments, radio equipment, reams of yellowed paper curling on the floor. And something else. Scratches. Long, deep gouges scored into the walls and floor, as if something heavy had been dragged or clawed through the building. My mouth went dry. I swept the beam across the room and found a set of stairs leading down, into the basement, into the dark. I didn't want to go. Every fiber of my being rebelled at the thought, at the memory. But I thought of my brother, how he must have felt, standing here alone, hearing that voice, how he must have been terrified and still pressed forward. I owed him that much. I tightened my grip on the flashlight and started down the stairs, the wood groaning under my weight. Each step took me deeper into the cold. Each step took me closer to the place where the radio had gone silent. And somewhere below, in the shadows, I swear I heard it, a voice, whispering, calling my name. The stairs creaked under my boots, each groan of old wood magnified in the dead silence. The deeper I went, the colder it got, sharp and unnatural, the kind of cold that seemed to come from the walls themselves, not from any open door or broken window. The beam of my flashlight quivered as I descended, the darkness pressing closer with every step. At the bottom, I found myself in a narrow hallway, the concrete walls stained with damp and decay. The air smelled wrong, like wet iron and something older, something that had been rotting unseen for years. I hesitated at the base of the stairs, ears straining. Nothing. Just the sound of my own breathing, ragged and shallow. The hallway branched off into several rooms, their doors hanging open like broken mouths. I chose the one on the left first. It was a storage room, mostly empty now. Rust-eaten shelves lined the walls, their contents spilled across the floor. Spools of old recording tape, mouldy boxes of paper files, glass jars with labels so faded I couldn't read them. I picked my way through the wreckage, careful not to disturb anything more than necessary.
Toward the back of the room, half buried under a pile of broken equipment, I found something that made my blood run cold. A journal. It was old, its leather cover cracked and stiff, the pages yellowed and curling at the edges, but the ink was still legible. The first few entries were routine, weather observations, radio checks, maintenance logs. Then, around late September, something changed. Short, clipped notes, mentions of interference on frequencies, reports of anomalous barometric readings, a line scratched in shaky handwriting. Station 13 received unauthorized transmissions, source unknown, content unintelligible. The entries grew more erratic after that, whole pages torn out, sentences half finished, one final scrawl at the very end. Do not answer the voice, no matter what it says, no matter what it promises. I closed the journal slowly, my hands trembling. Something had happened here, something they tried to bury. I left the storage room and moved deeper into the station. The next room was what remained of the communications hub. A shattered console sprawled across the floor, its tangled guts of wiring exposed like a dissected animal. In the corner, a battered metal locker stood half open, a faint mechanical whirring noise leaking from it. I approached cautiously, heart hammering against my ribs. Inside, perched on a cracked shelf, was an old reel-to-reel recorder. Somehow, impossibly, it was still running. The reels spun lazily, the tape whispering through the machine. I leaned in closer, straining to hear. Static at first. Then, a voice, warped, broken, barely human. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone, there was something pleading in it, something desperate. The sound crawled over my skin, raising goosebumps. I reached out to stop the tape, some foolish instinct to silence whatever was speaking, but just before my fingers touched it, the voice changed. It spoke my name, clear as day, whispered like a lover, begged like a dying man. I stumbled back, knocking into the locker hard enough to send a metallic clang echoing down the hallway. The tape reels spun on, indifferent. I backed out of the room, flashlight jerking wildly, my pulse roaring in my ears. I had to get out. I had to leave. But some terrible part of me, some deep, marrow-deep instinct kept whispering, go deeper, find it, finish what he started. I forced myself to breathe, to think. There was one more door at the end of the hallway. Heavy, steel, bolted at some point, though now the bolts hung uselessly from their rusted housings. It stood slightly ajar, just like the front door. Behind it, I could hear something, a low, rhythmic thudding, like a heartbeat slowed to a crawl. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. It was a maintenance room, or had been once. Now it was something else. The walls were covered in strange markings, circles, spirals, jagged intersecting lines, all scrawled in what looked disturbingly like ash or soot. The floor was littered with old radio parts, dismantled and reassembled into bizarre configurations that defied logic or purpose. In the center of the room, a single chair sat under a hanging bulb that flickered weakly, and tied to the chair, slumped forward, was a man, or what was left of one. I froze, every instinct screaming at me to run. The figure was desiccated, mummified by time and cold. Skin pulled tight over bone, clothes rotted into tatters. Around his neck, hanging from a length of frayed cord, was a laminated ID badge. The name was almost illegible under the grime and decay, but I could still make out enough. Station 13, Communications Officer, C. Whitmore, Chris. I staggered back, bile rising in my throat. No, it couldn't be. Chris hadn't worked here. He'd never even been out this far until the night we drove up. I stumbled closer, against every better judgment, lifting the badge with shaking fingers. It was real. And so was the figure in the chair. But it wasn't my brother. The proportions were wrong, the bones too long, the posture unnatural, like something had worn his shape the way a man wears a coat. A low sound rose in my throat, half sob, half scream, and I turned to flee. That's when the lights went out. The weak bulb overhead flickered once, twice, and died. plunging me into perfect, suffocating darkness. And somewhere in the black, just beyond the reach of my feeble flashlight, I heard it again. The voice, closer now, calling, begging, promising. I don't know how long I stood there, frozen in that blackness. Could have been seconds, could have been hours. Time unraveled down there, stretching thin and brittle like ice about to crack. The flashlight in my hand felt heavier now, slick with sweat, but I couldn't bring myself to turn it on. Some deep primal part of me knew light would only make it worse. The voice grew louder. It didn't sound like Chris anymore. It didn't even sound human. It was a noise shaped into words, a broken attempt at familiarity, something trying to wrap itself in memories that didn't belong to it. I backed toward the door, fumbling with my free hand, heart hammering against my ribs so violently I thought it might burst. The tips of my fingers brushed cold metal, the door frame, but something else too, something slick and warm. I jerked my hand away and stumbled into the hallway. The darkness here was different, thicker, almost tangible. It pressed against my skin like a living thing, trying to push me back, trying to pull me under. I ran. Down the hall, up the stairs. Every step an act of sheer will against the crushing wrongness that clawed at my mind. When I finally burst through the main floor, the dying light of the storm outside was a blinding mercy. But the station wasn't empty anymore. Figures moved in the corners of my vision, too fast, too slow, wrong in a way my brain refused to fully comprehend. I didn't look at them. I couldn't. I kept my eyes locked on the door, lungs burning, legs screaming for relief. And as I sprinted for the exit, something called after me. Not words, not anymore, just raw sound, thick and wet and hungry. I didn't stop. I didn't slow down. I burst out into the open, the wind and rain slashing at my face like claws. For a heartbeat, I thought I was safe. Then I heard it. The radios. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, crackling to life all at once. From inside the station, from the broken tower overhead, from somewhere deep beneath the earth, all tuned to the same frequency, all broadcasting the same single message over and over. Come back, come back, come back. I ran toward the truck, stumbling over the uneven ground, slipping in the mud. The engine coughed once, twice, then roared to life with a shudder that rattled my bones. I didn't waste time. I tore out of there, wheels spinning, mud spraying up into the storm-thick air. I didn't look back, not even when the radio's voices followed me, growing fainter and fainter until they were swallowed by the storm. Not even when I thought I saw something moving in the rearview mirror, something tall and thin and wrong, standing just at the edge of the headlight's reach. I drove. I don't remember much about that drive back to Greystone, only flashes. The way the wind seemed to howl words through the broken windows of the town. The way the few remaining houses all had their lights off, as if hiding from something that had come home. The way the old woman at Harlan's Supply watched me from behind the cracked glass, her mouth moving silently in a prayer or a curse. I didn't stop. Not until I hit the highway and left Greystone shrinking into the rear view, a smear of broken lights and broken dreams swallowed by the night. I told myself that was the end of it. That I could go home, lock the doors, turn up the heat, and drink until the memories blurred enough to forget. I was wrong. The first sign came 2 nights later, a crackling from the corner of my bedroom, a low, whispering static that didn't match anything on the radio, didn't match anything human. I smashed every electronic device in the house, one by one. It didn't matter. The sound wasn't coming from them. The second sign came a week after that. I was driving home from work, exhausted, lost in the haze of the day. The sky was clear, the stars sharp and bright. Then, without warning, the radio in my truck switched on. Static at first, then the voice, whispering my name, begging me to turn around. I pulled over and tore the radio out of the dash with my bare hands. It kept whispering, even after it was dead in my lap. I left the truck on the side of the road and walked home. Haven't driven since. The third sign came last night. The dream. Or maybe it wasn't a dream. I was lying in bed, paralyzed, the moonlight casting long shadows across the floor. And there, standing in the corner of my room, was a figure. Thin, too tall, wearing the loose, tattered shell of my brother's face. Its mouth hung open in a silent scream. Its hands twitched and jerked at its sides like a puppet with broken strings, and it whispered, "Come back, come back, come back." I woke up screaming, or maybe I never woke up. I don't know anymore. This morning I found something on my porch, an old battered radio, identical to the one Chris used. It was dead when I found it, but when I touched it, it crackled to life for just a second, just long enough for a final broken transmission to whisper through the static. You left me behind. You promised you'd stay. Come back. I don't know what they are. I don't know what they want. Maybe they're not after me. Maybe they're just using my brother's face because they know it's the one thing I can't turn away from. Maybe that thing in the weather station wasn't trying to keep me out. Maybe it was trying to warn me.
And maybe now it's too late, because tonight, when I closed my eyes, I heard it again. The hum of static, the whisper of a voice not quite mine, the soft crackle of a radio, turning itself on. I don't know why I kept the radio. Maybe part of me still hoped there was something human left in it, some last scrap of my brother clawing through the static trying to reach me. Or maybe it's simpler than that. Maybe it's because when you get that close to something, wrong, you don't walk away untouched. You carry it with you, inside you. The radio sat on my kitchen table all night, silent, heavy, waiting. I couldn't bring myself to touch it again. Instead, I sat across from it in the dark, the clock on the wall ticking out the slow, merciless crawl of time. At some point, around 3 a.m, I think, the air changed. You could almost feel it, like a shift in pressure before a storm. The walls seemed to draw closer, the shadows deepened, and then, from the battered speaker, a whisper. Not words, this time, just breathing. Slow, wet, ragged. It filled the room like smoke, thick and choking, making it hard to breathe, hard to think. I pressed my hands over my ears. It didn't help. The sound was inside me, like it had burrowed beneath my skin. Then came the knock. 3 soft raps at the front door, measured, patient. I didn't move, didn't dare. Another knock, harder this time. I squeezed my eyes shut, heart hammering, blood roaring in my ears. I thought if I stayed perfectly still, perfectly silent, it would leave. But then, from the radio, a voice, crackling and broken, speaking in a voice I hadn't heard in years but would know anywhere, my mother's voice. Honey, open the door, it's so cold out here, please. Tears burned hot tracks down my cheeks. She's been dead for 6 years. I shook my head, whispering, no, 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 over and over like a prayer, like a shield. Another knock, soft again, almost tender. The voice from the radio changed. My brother's voice now, quiet, lost. It's me. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to leave you. I'm scared. Please, just open the door. I broke. I stood up. I didn't mean to. I swear I didn't. But my legs moved without my permission, carrying me to the front door like a puppet on strings. My hand hovered over the deadbolt. The air was freezing, the cold radiating through the door like a living thing, numbing my fingers. From behind me, the radio whispered one last thing, not in Chris's voice, not in my mother's, in my own. You're already inside. The last thing I remember is the door swinging inward, into a darkness deeper than the night outside. Something reaching for me, not with hands, not with flesh, with memory, with love, with every piece of me that ever ached for something lost. They found me 2 days later. The neighbor, Mr. Harding, called the cops when he noticed my truck still parked outside, covered in frost and ice. They found me sitting in the middle of the living room. No lights, no heat, just me and the radio, its battery long since dead. I don't remember what I told them. Something about sleepwalking, about grief. They didn't press too hard. People are good at turning away from the things they don't want to understand. I left town after that, packed what little I had into a battered duffel bag and drove west without looking back. But it followed me. It always does. In the static on motel TVs, in the crackling of broken speakers in bus stations, in the wind whispering through half-open windows, always the same words. Come back. You left me behind. You promised. Sometimes I think about going back, finding the station again, finishing whatever it was Chris started that night. Maybe it's the only way to end it. Maybe it's what it wants. But every time I start down that road, something stops me. A memory, a feeling. Or maybe just the part of me that still remembers how it felt standing in that basement, the darkness closing in, hearing my own name called from a mouth that had never been human. If you're hearing this, if somehow this story found its way into your hands, please don't go looking for it. Don't go digging into places that were meant to be forgotten. Some doors aren't meant to be opened. Some voices aren't meant to be answered. Some things, once you invite them in, they never really leave. They just wait, in the static, in the silence between heartbeats, in the spaces where memory blurs into nightmare, waiting, whispering, calling you home.